So the fifth episode of Boys Planet aired this week, and it was an elimination results episode. Now, if you didn't catch the hour-long first survival announcement livestream the day after last week's episode, you've probably missed out on an expanded walkout intro that was kind of briefly summarized in the beginning of this episode. But other than that, it was full of eliminations. There's 2 content breaks that include a dance battle, and then there's also some wardrobe pranks, and that's basically the gist of this show. So it won't be a typical recap. Instead, it'll be more or less kind of just my thoughts and the results in the process. And so I'm going to give you a spoiler alert here. You shouldn't even be watching my recaps unless you've seen the show. I don't think there's anyone who watches my show to get a recap of this show, really. I feel like you probably just watch my recaps to get my thoughts, predictions, just to see someone who thinks differently than you, maybe. But if you haven't caught the episode, now is probably the time to catch it. And I don't know if there's any place you can see the first survival announcement live stream. It was 45 minutes long, and it was like just super long. It was summarized in the beginning. You don't really need to see it, but it is kind of dragged out. And so let's just forget about that for now. Let's just get started. So this week's eliminations, in my opinion, it was kind of a massacre for G Group, and only 40% of G Group survived the process. I feel like overall the process hasn't entirely been fair to G Group, pretty much since the early non-English sub-content that came out in December. And if you don't know that content came out since December, it did. And so a lot of K voters, they got a chance to kind of get attached to people early on, build momentum. But G Group voters, global voters, they were kind of left in the dark until the show came out. And so there's not a lot of time to really catch up. And a lot of that time attack stuff that I rated early on, it's not even translated. And so there was no way for kind of like global people to get familiar with people. And so really, in the beginning, the only people who had a sound grasp of who everyone was were the K Group voters. And it's not entirely crazy to think that they went slant towards K Group. So I feel like it was probably too early to have an elimination show. You know, I wanted to see if people could perform at least twice, just to see the consistency of their performance potential, you know? And I feel like there were some people who did poorly, but they coasted on early favoritism as well. So if you're going to have like a K Group and a G Group, there's really just no reason to not split the show up into dedicated episodes and give everyone else airtime for the early episodes. We see this in X Factor, it's in Got Talent, The Voice, even Survivor does this. And so there are many people who weren't even able to get the benefit of being summarized. Talented dancers like Haru were completely leapfrogged over, even during the team selection. Like, they would literally show one guy, and then like you would see a short blip of the whole team, and then suddenly Haru was there, and then they were like putting on suspense for who would be after Haru. But they wouldn't even mention Haru's name. They wouldn't even talk about him at all. And so I feel like I'm not saying that what would be fair here is if 50% of G Group and 50% of K Group survived. That's not even my contention, really. What I'm saying would be fair is if everyone got airtime, and no one is hand selected to get like storylines in the first like 2 or 3 or 4 episodes here. That's my main contention, is that there are a whole bunch of people eliminated and we didn't even know who they were if you just watched the main show. So moving on, I would say that the biggest loss to this show is probably Kim Min Seung. And he was eliminated, and he was one of my top 9 picks. I chose him from the time attacks. I think nobody really knew who he was or what he was even capable of. And he basically got eliminated on the show because of the rushed process. Like, the most you will know about Kim Min Seung is that he's a guy who did a flip in every single performance. And then it wasn't until this episode that you really got to even see who he was. Like, in the last episode, you got to see he was teaching Han Yu-jin some stuff about how to perform. But other than that, no one really knew who he was. And so, moving on, we have Baek Do-ha and Jung Min-gyu. These are the Silk brothers, one blue silk shirt and one red silk shirt, and they actually ranked pretty decently. I wouldn't have expected that personally. They are entertaining. Like, I've always been entertained by them, but I wouldn't have selected them. I wouldn't have like pushed them through. But it seems like some people, they're very sympathetic towards these kind of people, and they vote out of sympathy maybe, or they genuinely just like them before their visuals or personality. and they just want people to survive on the show, but they don't really care about the group itself. But it's things like this. Like, I feel like it's interesting how you have these people. These guys are in the middle, and they probably have like way more votes than people in the 52nd place. And then you have people in the first place. The top three, they have nearly 20 times the vote of someone from the 52nd spot. And the 52nd spot is about 300,000 votes, I think. And in that range, I guess you can see how the bonuses they got if they won the performance benefit, it can definitely help those guys. Actually, I would say the biggest robbery of the show is probably the elimination of Yuki and other people close to that range due to like people like Jong Ai-chan and other people who got performance benefits. It was enough to push them out. And here's the thing, Jong Ai-chan, he did such a bad performance that it was detrimental to his group's performance. And if you objectively looked at both performances, they should have lost. But because of favoritism of individual members of the group, people like Jong Ai-chan got carried by those guys. And so, and because of that, people like Yuki got kicked out, and Yuki's just been relatively quiet. No one really talks about him much. He hasn't had a chance to even be highlighted, really. Anyways, it just looks like a lot of people survived because of those performance point bonuses. But that's not even really a big deal, I think, because I don't really believe that trainee is from the 40 to 52 range. Like, I don't even think they can disrupt the top 20, except for if there were more kind of like obviously good performers like Wang Zihao or Park Han Bin. And if those people, if they gained votes, it would have to be from the eliminated performers, because there's at least like the people from 53 to 99. There were people who favored those guys. Now they're able to distribute it, and if they feel like their favorites were like unfairly robbed, then they might start voting based on merit. And so merit-based performers can definitely benefit from that. But then you hear about stuff like Mnet moving from a 9-vote pick to a 6-point pick. And that kind of prevents this whole like corrective or elastic shifting elimination vote thingy going on here. And I feel like keeping that in mind, like they're changing from 9 to 6 really. And so we're not going to be able to choose our top 9. But anyways, nobody should have been eliminated. We need 2 stages, and also people need to get highlights across the board. There was an interesting follow-up in the episode regarding Na Kamdan and Christian. Na Kamdan got into the 31st spot, and Christian got into the 37th. And Christian also publicly, he apologized, and I thought that was a good thing. And, you know, I was saying last week, I kind of wanted Christian to get his redemption, because ultimately, I don't think he intentionally meant any harm. And also, Na Kamden, he grew from the experience in a way that he needed to grow. Like, when I saw him kind of taking it, I was like, that wouldn't be me. I wouldn't let that happen to me. I mean, I'm not that guy. I'm not going to let you walk over me like that. And I was just waiting for Na Kamden to grow some. But then he eventually did. But they didn't give that same redemption to Christian, who probably wasn't intending to cause any harm. And then I also discussed in the comments that I feel like part of his behavior was actually subconsciously stemming from kind of wanting to get the killing part. Because when you look at the discussion about the killing part, that's kind of when things go off the rails a little bit. But it looks like, you know, they basically let 2 episodes go by. 2 episodes leading into eliminations, by the way. They let those go by without redeeming the conflicts that were probably resolved before the stage performances. Like the episode 3 conflict, they didn't resolve that, but you needed to in order to get to the episode 4 issues. And then there were new issues, and those were not really resolved in a way that was two-sided. It basically just helped knock him down. But, you know, Christian basically took the brunt of it in both episodes, and he apologized, and, you know, because I don't think he intended to cause harm. And so, to some degree, it's really hard to read people. And I would just say, I'm glad he got to apologize very publicly on this episode, and that we're going to be able to move forward. Also, he has a new look. He dyed his hair blonde. I think it works for him. Sung Hanbin and Sek Matthew, their brotherhood continues. It seems like they've decided to play strongly into it. I posed the question a few recaps ago that what were they going to do when we got to the live show and people were now talking about this because of Mnet showing it? Were they going to reject it? Were they going to play into it? I think like they're playing into it. I think maybe it's genuine for Matthew because I feel like when Matthew talks, he seems very humbled by experience and very genuine. Whereas Hanbin, he's a bit restrained. And I don't know if it's like a lack of enthusiasm, which is fine, or a concern over competition, which is kind of like, oh, was this guy like, would he be jealous if Sick Matthew got first place? Like, would he be genuinely upset and start being competitive against him and maybe resenting him? I don't know. Or is he just trying to avoid getting emotional overall? And I think that's probably more likely the case. Like, it seemed like he didn't want to cry and he was holding back. But this is also one of the reasons that Sung Hanbin was not rated highly by me, is because I'm looking for sincerity. And so with my sincerity-based rankings, I always see Sung Hanbin that's kind of reserved and closed off. And because of that, I wonder, is it intentional? Is he a very perceptive and sincere person, but he's just holding back? And I can't tell. And so that's one of the reasons Sung Hanbin and even Sek Matthew, he's been growing. He was in an S class, and I upgraded him to S plus class, so he could very much be in my top 9. Sung Hanbin, I haven't seen the growth. He's kind of like, he's almost pre-packaged. He's meant to be in the group, basically. But I didn't put him in my top 9. But I feel like he's going to be there no matter what. So it's not really about, I'm not trying to predict the top 9. I'm just trying to say who I think would be the best. But yeah, all I know is if people continually vote for them in pairs, I think both of them will be untouchable. And hopefully it's not like a Urina shouting thing where one doesn't debut without the other. Those guys were really tight, I feel like, and they could have been like a power kind of pair. But who knows? So I guess that's pretty much it. I'm not really that interested in a lot of things that happen to a lot of other people. We did get to see some interesting things. Leo Tech dropping. And that's not unexpected for me. We got to see Jay hit the top 9. We saw Gun Wook in the 10th position. Park Gun Wook, he's one of my top 9, so is Jay. They're actually both one of my top 9s from the very beginning, from the time attacks. And so I am interested in seeing them both move up. Park Gun Wook, I feel like, because he's had such a kind of rough process, and I think it's because they kind of want him to be the bad guy, but he's not inherently a bad guy. And so I had this bingo card for Roguish Bad Guy, and I was kind of hoping it would be him. I think if he was a bad guy, and sometimes you can kind of get hints of him being a bad guy, by the way. Because he's kind of like an anti-hero more, I feel like he will struggle to be in the top 9 because people can just block him out by voting for kind of more sure things. But I like him, and I want to see him grow, and he's going to have to shuffle out of his... I said this in the last recap, that Park Gun Wook has to shuffle out of his jellyfish guys, and he has to start sprinting on his own and becoming well known by the rest of the trainees as an easygoing guy to work with, so that he can be in teams without drama, and then just perform and pull off like great parts. And then when people warm up to him, then he'll be a lot more likely to be in the top 9. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Not too interested in a lot of the other people. I know that some people are more talented than the others. But here's the thing. It's like someone can be really talented and you could still want nothing from them. And that's just the way of the world. Some people vibe with some people don't. Sometimes you don't want a team of all Avengers and all All-Stars. You want a balanced team sometimes of people who seem like they're chill to get together and they'll elevate each other. And so I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I think if there's one thing I learned in 20 years of competitions, it's that early faves kind of dominate the show, and there's really only 1 or 2 trainees who will sneak into the top 10, and they'll top out anyone who's unworthy, and it's because they are worthy. And so there's always like a dark horse or something, and those people can even become like the ultimate top one winners, and that pretty much it's very easy to happen, but it can only be one person, and that's because you need the votes combined from all the people who get eliminated and want to like support the guy who's actually like good based on his merit. And I feel like the voters will realign to people out of a sense of justice sometimes. Actually, back in the day, there used to be online movements called Vote for the Worst, and I don't know if anyone remembers this, but it was sort of a protest, and sometimes it was a troll, but it was also kind of a revenge thing. Like, you used to see people saying, I'm just going to vote for the worst now. And, like, at the beginning of the show, everyone would be like, don't do that. But then, like, as people started to lose their favorites, they started to do it. And so I feel like the history of voters tends to be pretty bad. People will vote sometimes purely on technical ability, and they have no connection or intention of supporting the artist. Some will vote purely on a sob story. There was like an episode, a series. There was a series of The Voice, I think, where this girl was like kind of blind, and her singing wasn't that great, but she basically won the show. And then there's other people who vote for someone for entertainment value. Like, this guy's a bad singer, but he makes me laugh. And that kind of happens. That happened on X Factor as well. There was this guy who was like an old guy, and he just kind of came out and sung in kind of like a poorly done salsa style. And there's some people who vote purely out of fear or sympathy, which is probably the worst reasons to vote. And then there's some people who have like this unshakable allegiance, and this allegiance can be based on either their first choices, and this is kind of like, it's very similar to regional voting in a way, in that people are attached to something for some reason, either because they made the choice or because they grew up in a region area, and they want to vote for their people basically to win personally. They feel like they personally want to win out of it. They get some satisfaction out of it. And I've discussed this in the past with people, but we usually come to the same consensus. The best way to vote is to vote for the people whose albums you would buy and whose songs you would stream. And I think it's a benefit that you get to choose your top 9. But if Mnet restricts it only to the top 6, I feel like that just cripples the chances of the people in the slots from 7 to 9. And the only reason to change this, I think, is to either stop the eliminated voters from shifting their votes because they either think that's less valuable, or they just want to stop people like Jay or Kada, which are G group guys. They want to stop them from debuting. And, you know, a lot of the top 9 ranks so far, I feel like in other polls, it's always the G groups who are in kind of like the bottom slots of the top 9. And so this would actually eliminate a lot of G group guys if that was the case. But, you know, you're going to basically, like I said before, they basically highlighted only a few people. They were mostly K group people. They gave them storylines and their status quo. And basically, Mnet doesn't want them to be moved out of that position. I don't know why, but obviously it's a form of rigging. And so in the current top 10, I feel like there is just the typical Avengers top picks kind of people, but I'm not sure if it's a balanced team. Only 3 of my original top 9 survived in the top 10. But I'm glad to see there's 3 of them there. But out of the whole 52, only 5 of my top 9 is there. 4 people fell off. And so I will have to rebuild a balanced team moving forward. You know, I feel like for survival shows like this, a balanced group is more important than just selecting the people you guess might be popular or trying to predict the winners. To me, all the top single picks are just kind of, like, I think I've said this before, but I feel like you're building a competition rather than a team. It's like 9 people who would compete to become the top number 1 guy. And I feel like that's what you're kind of doing when you pick a certain way, rather than, you know, where's my rapper? Where's my vocal? Where's my Macne, you know, like, who are my balanced teams? How will this guy get along with this guy? Will this all-rounder conflict with this guy who has, like, the center value, you know? And I'm sure people will disagree about this, but when I look at truly harmonious groups with longevity, you know, I look at what JYP does with 16 or the Neezy Project, and I have a lot more respect for that process because I feel like they know what they're doing, they know what they want, And there are some people who are like, wow, that girl's beautiful. She probably should have been in the top 9, but they didn't put her in because she would have been disruptive to the group. And maybe that girl's more suited for something solo, like Somi or something. But yeah, so far, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I definitely want Kim Ji Woon and Yoon Jong Woo in my top 9. Yoon Jong would be new to the top 9, and he would basically be replacing Kim In Sung. Then come Han Jian, he was basically already in my top 9, but then I lost Wang Ye Chen, and I would replace that with Wang Zihao, who is really good at dance. He's proven himself multiple times. And then I still have Jay and Park Gun Wook and Hiroto. And then I have 2 extra slots, and I think they were taken before. I'm blanking on his name right now. But I have 2 extra slots. I'm guessing it's going to be Sung Han Bin or Matthew. I don't know the point of not picking those 2 guys. I feel like they throw off the vibe of the group, though. But right now, looking at the top 52, I don't see anyone who can go into this group and kind of do a good job in it as well as and also fit into the original vibe that I was going for. And so I would just put those guys in there tentatively, but they're not my first. They wouldn't be my first choice if I had different people who could be in there. But I guess that's pretty much all my thoughts on it. And yeah, thanks for listening. I guess that's pretty much it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comment box down below. Who are your top 9s? What do you think about the people I've selected? Maybe you don't really care. maybe you are one of those people who like the Avengers, and you're like, oh, I want to have a Zhang Hao in there. I want to have a Keita in there. And those guys are great picks if you're building a certain type of group, but they're not for my group. But other than that, if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing, and then I'll see you in the next video.